And hey, guys, this thing still works. How about that? Hey, John Maddox here, host of the, I guess we could call it on hiatus podcast Tigers Tonight, with the best co-host in all the land, the one and only Brian Moss and Larry Marley. Gentlemen, how are you this evening?
Not too bad. How are you, John?
I can't really complain. It's cold. It's been windy and wet here all day, but hey, Larry,
I'm in
you're
New Orleans, so
yeah.
I'm doing fine. I'm
So
doing
life is good.
just fine.
So this is one of the things I look forward to. I don't like the off season, but I look forward to this every year after the football season, where we do during the off season here, we do a segment called "Why I Coach," where we get a different coach from different different parts of the athletic department. Tonight, we're pleased to be joined by he's not the newest member of the Memphis staff, but he's the newest defensive coordinator at the University of Memphis, Coach Jordan Hankins. Coach Hankins, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Hey, thanks for taking some time tonight. So before we get into the meat of all the tough questions here, I got to ask, after the Liberty Bowl, to me, the highest honor an opposing coach can give the other team is to say, well, they did some things we weren't expecting. And those were Matt Campbell's first words in the press conference. And then Coach Silverfield said that you guys basically put in a new scheme in 9 practices to accomplish that goal. How in the world did you guys pull that off? Because it was probably one of the top defensive performances we've had at Memphis in quite a long time to held Iowa State to 0 rushing yards. So talk us through that a little bit about, how do you kind of get this whole new thing done in 9 practices?
I guess the best way to describe it is repetition. Everything from a defensive standpoint is a responsive reaction based. So and when you're dealing with a group of guys that they all learn in different levels, they all learn in different ways. I think that the biggest thing is just repetition as many times as they could see a certain picture without it being staged. And it's always been my opinion from the defensive side of the ball, you have to train your players. You can't just go out there and it's not theater. You can't go out there and, okay, I need them to memorize this versus this picture. Okay, well, if this picture doesn't happen, they're looking for a picture that doesn't exist. And, my main goal, regardless of the scheme, it really doesn't matter. I've been in a defense that's 3-3-5. I've been in a defense that's 4-2-5. I've been in a defense that's 4-3. I've been in a defense that's 3-4. Been in a defense that ran quarters, cover 2, cover 3, cover 1, to trap. I've ran all of these defenses, and the common denominator in my mind is if you do anything whatsoever that slows down a player, you take the advantage away. Because offenses already have the advantage. They know exactly where they're going when the ball's snapped. So the way that you have to sort of practice it, in my opinion, is you have to give all your players the ability, no matter how they learn, you have to give them the ability to see different pictures. And when they go back and watch the film, and then they go back and do it again, and then they go back and watch the film, and then they go back and do it again. Okay, so if they line up in this formation versus this call on this set, what are you looking for? So there's no possible way, especially when you get to situations on defense, that you can show them everything that they need to see with every possible call that you want them to see. So you have to sort of train those guys by reps and by meetings and by communication and just having different talks with different players who are the guys that are going to be the ones talking on the field in the game. When I'm standing on the sideline cheering like a cheerleader, I'm not changing the game. Those guys have to be able to communicate to other guys of, okay, if we get this, you need to be at this level, or you need to be on this side of him, or you have to train guys on defense. Where can I miss? If they know where they can miss, they know where they can take a shot. And we hit a lot on playing on edges, staying off the middle of them, because obviously y'all saw how big they were. Iowa State was a big team up front. We didn't go in there to play a boxing match. We went in there to play on edges and change the pictures. And once I think maybe after practice 4 or 5, when some of the players started seeing, through practice and repetition, like it started figuring things out. And we took calls out, we added calls, and we took calls out, and we added calls. But at the end of the day, for me, was if there was ever anything that we did in practice that slowed the process down or slowed how they played down, I threw it out immediately. And by practice 7, call sheet was made because that's what we could do well. And that's ultimately how it happened. And repetition and just finding out, who works best beside each other, trying to put them in those positions to be successful and make the plays when they had the opportunity to make them.
Take us back to your high school days. Where did you grow up? What position did you play in high school? And did you play other sports?
I played all 3. You are going to have fun with this. So actually, people will go crazy on Google here. I grew up in a small town called Hohenwald, Tennessee. And it's known for being heard as hole in the wall because it is in the middle of nowhere. But I grew up in Hohenwald, Tennessee, played at Lewis County High School, graduated in 1999, played all 3 sports, played basketball, baseball, and football. I played basketball up until my sophomore year but if you ever grow up in a small town where football is king, the head football coach usually runs everything. And I found out after my sophomore year that the head football coach went to the head basketball coach and had me cut, and I was starting. And I said, well, I guess I'm not playing basketball. He said, no, you need to work out more. Okay. But so football was obviously the sport that I loved. Baseball, I loved baseball, but I did play multiple sports, as my kids do too. And, it was a fun time growing up, and always had the competitive type deal, chip on your shoulder type of player is how I would describe myself. But that's where I grew up.
Now, when you played for Lewis County, what years did you play? Did you were you starting or playing that 96 year? Was it 96, 97, 98?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because that 96 team, did you guys get, the 95 team, you guys got to the quarterfinals, but I guess you would have been a freshman. So the 96 team, 97, I think all 3 years you guys lost to Westview. What do you remember about Westview and you couldn't get over that hump?
That is crazy. You're talking about a blast from the past. The neat thing about Westview, because I obviously played college football at UT Martin. So when I went to UT Martin, there were like 3 guys on that team that all played for Westview, and we're still friends today. As a matter of fact, 2 of them were in my wedding, and one of them was Kendrick, and Kendrick was the running back that they had in '98, and he was one reason that we didn't win. He was very, very good. And I remember, and the quarterback Ashton Jennings was also in my wedding for Martin Westview. And like I said, I talked to those guys pretty much once a week, even to today. But they were just a good football team. I mean, we were a small school. I graduated with like 96 people. We had like 6 seniors on our team, and but always the Achilles heel. I mean, we would always win a bunch of games, but I mean, growing up there, I would have thought it was the New England Patriots until I got out of it and figured out, okay, I'm not as good as I thought I was, But I can't believe you brought that memory up. That's great.
Well, before we get to your college years, I wanted to ask about the recruiting process. Were any schools after you did Memphis, come around and recruit you?
No. To be honest, I went and played. I was going to go play baseball, and I had a bunch of because I played some travel league ball, what little it was back then, but I did play in some. And one of my travel league coaches got me on at Union University. I went and played baseball there first, and I was there for 1 year. And after 1 year, I figured out I missed hitting people and playing football, and I actually left Union and went up to UT Martin, and Sam McCorkle was the head coach at that time. I walked in, had no idea who he was. I remember because I was working construction trying to save money to go to UT Martin to play football because I wanted to play football so bad. I walked into admissions and Sam McCorkle, who I did not know who he was standing at the front desk. And as a matter of fact, I saw Sam McCorkle 2 days ago at the AFCA convention. And he's a man that changed my life. And I walked into admissions. I said, yeah, I mean, is there any way I can get in touch with the football coach? I'd really like to play football here. And he was actually in admissions. And he turned around and he said, I'm the football coach. I said, okay, sir. And I asked him what his name was. And we walked over to his office. He said, what do you do? I said, well, I went to Union University. I played baseball. And it hasn't worked out for me. I wasn't doing very good in school. And he said, well, what are you doing right now getting prepared for that? I said, well, coach, I'm working construction 5 days a week. And a matter of fact, at the time, which is an awesome story because I pass it every day to work, I was working construction for a guy from West Tennessee, and our job was located in Memphis. And I passed the hotel every day that I was working at. And I remember standing on top of that building holding plywood and the wind almost blowing me off of it. And I saved all that money up to put in to get into school at UT Martin. And Sam McCorkle said, so you're driving to Memphis? I said, well, I'm actually riding with another worker. I didn't have a vehicle at the time. So I was riding with another, and I said, no, I'm doing that. And he said, how'd you get up here? He said, I had somebody bring me up here and I just took a chance in trying to meet you. And he goes, you got a spot on this team. So I went in as a walk-on, and I think it was the third week into camp. McCorkle brought me into my office, and he goes, you know what? I'm going to put you on scholarship. He said, you're going to play for us. And it's like, for that whole summer, I had no idea what was going to happen. And UT Martin gave me that opportunity, and I'm forever grateful, forever grateful.
So I know a little bit something about the OVC, a little bit. And for the record, my record was 2-1 against Martin. But regardless of that, that was 10 years before you. So I'm a little bit older than you. But you walked on, and that's awesome. I know a little something about that. So tell me about when you guys played defense, what molded you? What did you learn in college that molded you into the coach you are now?
You talking about while I was a player?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, I played for a lot of different coaches. Obviously, when you're at OVC, there's a lot of turnover, and I talked to my my high school head coach less than an hour ago.
Wow.
Every coach that, to me, in my mind, the way I look at this profession, football saved my life. I'm just being honest with you. This is not trying to sell a story, because from my transition to Union to Martin and how that transpired to get me in that situation, my head football coach in high school is actually the one that sort of helped me get to that point, and obviously coaching me. And my head high school football coach right now and my mom and dad they're best friends. So I always looked at him as a father figure. But when I looked at other coaches, like every coach that bypassed, I was always looking for how he treated the players, how he taught, because then, you're a teacher. That's what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I always said, okay, my number one thing is I am who I am. I'm not going to change who I am. I'm not going to change, I'm going to try to educate myself and be better. But I always tried to take a little piece of every coach, whether it was Andy Rondo as the defense coordinator, who's the head coach at Pace up in New York now, Sammy McCorkle, who's the head coach at Dartmouth now. He was the DC when I first got there. Every one of these guys, how they taught and how they dealt with players that wasn't exactly in their position room. I always looked at that, because if you can develop relationships with guys that you don't meet with every day, I think that's key. The guys that you meet with every day, obviously, are, you expect to have relationships with them. You're sitting in the meeting room with them every day. You're talking, but the way that, guys that Johnny Jernigan was another guy that was a D-line coach that I really looked up to when I was a player. because I was a linebacker. He was a D-line coach, but he developed a relationship with me, and I never sat in a meeting with him. And so
Right.
like every one of these coaches, like whether you coached me or I've coached with you, whether it's high school level, I don't care, high school, middle school, college. To me, it's just about the guys that can develop the relationships and teach. Those are the things that I've sort of picked up in a way that doesn't come off from who I really am. And I try to take little pieces of all of that stuff because everybody comes from different backgrounds, broken families, no hardly any family at home, or a full family at home, a wealthy family. It doesn't matter, because when you get out there and you're playing defense, none of that matters anymore. And it comes down to relationships and developing those relationships. And if you don't develop those relationships, the teaching process and the education that you're trying to put in front of them every day, it's going to go on silent ears, and now you're wasting time.
So true story. My best friend from Tennessee Tech was from Hohenwald. True story. And so I know a lot about your small town. My question is this. So I played with guys from small towns. I played with guys from Nashville. I played with guys transferred in. What do you think is different with kids? I say kids, young adults today as to when you played? What are the biggest differences?
Well, I mean, there's not near as many that have summer jobs anymore. And it's not really, it's just the work ethic part. Like, that was just, we all had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a choice. My uncle laid brick for a living. Well, guess what? When I got off school every day, I went and mixed mortar. That's what I did. And I cleaned brick. And my dad had a field that we would have to bale hay in. I would go out in the field on a Saturday morning after the Friday night game, and I would throw square bales on a trailer. And it's not really, I don't think it's the kid's fault. It's just the changing of the times. I've got two sons right now that are 14 and 12.
Bless your heart.
They play travel ball. They play, there's just so much more now that it's just like everything else. Like if you don't let them play travel ball, or if you don't let them do the extra training, or if you don't let them do I'm always scared as a parent that I'm letting them get behind. And now, obviously, I would love for them to have a job, but at what point do you squeeze all those things in, and just developing that work ethic, I think, has been lost over the years, not because of choice, because of time restraints. Like I got to play travel ball for, I think, 2 years, and it wasn't until I was almost 17 years old. And that's when it started. Well, now it's travel baseball, it's travel basketball, it's 7-on-7 football, it's all these different things. And I think they're getting pulled in so many directions. They don't have time to be a kid or just go get a job. And I try to balance that the best way I can for my kids right now, because there's going to come a time and a place where all of that ends, and you got to go to work. So I try to balance that where, one, they have the opportunity to be a kid, but they also have the opportunity to learn life lessons that aren't taught on a diamond or on a court or on a field. And I think that's the biggest difference in my eyes.
So thinking back to your college days, when you were playing defense, and I've told John this many times, that I always knew what we were going to run on 3rd and 3 and 3rd and 7. I pretty much always knew. Was there a certain defensive setup that you personally liked playing in? And was there a specific play that you really liked?
Oh, no. I mean, obviously, anytime that they blitzed me, I loved it.
Yeah.
You mean to tell me I've got no run pass responsibility and I can go? Absolutely. That's what I'm doing. And anything, what I always liked was when coaches could make everything smaller for me, from a rule standpoint to a fit standpoint to a formation check standpoint to whatever it is. If they could ever minimalize those things for me, because I wasn't a great football player, and I was limited on speed. So if you ever made me slower, I had no shot. And as a player, I knew that. So that's on it, like the chip on your shoulder, like all that. But for coaches, if they could make the decision making in the point of the game smaller for me, where I felt like I was playing fast, I could care less schematically. It's just being able to minimize in the moment when it's an opportunity for me to get production or make a play or set up a play for somebody else. If that decision was smaller for me to make, that's what I liked.
So last question for me, thinking back on your playing days, which player that you played with would you like to have playing at Memphis right now?
Oh, wow. Nick Stamper.
All right.
Nick
What
Stamper.
did he play?
He was a defensive end. He went to the Ravens for a little while. Because, and another thing, I like Nick, like all these people that I'm bringing up are, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but Nick was one of those guys when I went through the story with you as walking on at UT Martin. So obviously FCS school 2001 or whatever it is, we didn't have summer money. There wasn't there. Hey, you show back up for camp and I hope you're in shape. That's what that process was. Well, when I got the opportunity to do that, I just went on and moved to Martin. So I went and got a job up there on campus and I started working on campus. And on it, the whole first season, I would go to class, I would go to the dorms and I would paint dorm rooms and touch base because I worked for the paint company, a paint crew at the university because that was my work study. And then I'd show back at practice with paint on my arms where I've been painting the dorms. But Nick Stamper was the guy, big time player. He was a senior when I first got there. But I walk in, he's the only one in the weight room. The only one. And
wow.
He was sitting there warming up, I think, with like 315 pounds on the bench. and I walk up and he was the only person there that summer. I think it was May or June. I can't exactly remember, but I remember walking in that brick block weight room where we had about 3 benches. And he was sitting there. He said, "Hey, I'm about to warm up. You want to work out?" I was like, "Yeah. You want me to set up this other bench?" I said, "Because I don't."
You want to take plates off this?
I was like, I don't want to slow you down, but and I could bench a little bit. I felt good about myself until I met Nick.
Right.
But Nick was he didn't care where I was from. He didn't care my ability. He didn't care any of those things. And the only thing he cared about was if I wanted to work, he was going to allow me to work with him. And Nick, to this day, is strength and conditioning and a trainer at the University School of Jackson, an hour away. I actually go by the school and when I go by and recruit him, give him a hug and we talk about our kids and all those things. And just those type of guys that he never judged me. He never asked if I was on scholarship, if I was a walk-on. And then he went and played with the Ravens, and he's got a beautiful family, and he's made a great career for himself. But that would be the one guy, just because it was so early in my career. Now I played with a bunch of great guys, but that would be the guy that sort of opened my eyes to how you treat other people when you don't know their background and you don't know where they came from.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, in today's Everybody Knows Something from Hohenwald, my best man in my wedding was actually the band director at Lewis County High School in the mid 2010s. So, and also the home of America's largest elephant sanctuary is Hohenwald, Tennessee.
That's right.
All right, so
I've got a cousin that works there.
So now that we have exhausted all of our knowledge of Hohenwald, Tennessee, usually, Coach, when we go through these things with assistant football coaches, I kind of have to roll the scroll out to see all the places guys have been. I've been here for a year, here for a year. So you worked with Jason Simpson at UT Martin for 10 seasons, I believe it was, including a famous visit to Memphis in 2012, Coach Fuente's first season. The longest football game I've ever been at in my life. We had a 3.5-hour rain delay. Yeah. And of course, Martin defeated Memphis 20-17 on that night. But, what is it about somebody like Coach Simpson? Because, a lot of guys, like I said, I'm here for 2 years and I want to go here, and then I'm going to go here, and my ultimate goal is here. But what was it about the UT? Was part of it you were home, or was part of it just Coach Simpson was just such a great leader and you just felt like you didn't really want to go anywhere else?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of both, honestly. Like, first of all, like when I was at River, I didn't play for Coach Simpson. So when the turnover happened after I got done playing, and I took the job at Riverdale High School in Murfreesboro, he was just I was running the weight room at Riverdale High School at the time, and I got lucky because my first job I coached offensive line. That was my first job, and I had to learn how to do that on the run. But the main job for me at Riverdale was running the weight room, and Coach Simpson came by one day, and I was in the weight room, and I was actually working a group out, and I didn't even know he was in the weight room. He was back in the back with the head coach, and and there was another coach, Jeep Wade, who's now the offensive line coach at Georgia Tech, was with him, and I knew Jeep a little bit. So I was running the weight room, and we finished the class, and they both walk out the back door. Well, Jeep comes back to the back door, and he says, "Hey, Jordan, come out here for a second." Okay. And so I walk out there, and Coach Simpson goes, "Hey, I might have an opportunity for you at UT Martin." I said, "Okay." He said, would you consider coaching in college? Which honestly, that's what I always wanted to do. But I sort of just take opportunities as they come and just put my head down and work. And I just know the thing's going to work out at some point. But I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'd love to talk to you." Well, he calls me back about 3 weeks later, and I'm fresh out of college and on a teaching salary and a stipend salary, and never had much money in the first place. So I was happy. I wasn't starving at all. We had one child on the way at the time. And he called me and he says, "Hey, I'd like for you to come." I said, "Okay." So I didn't know anything about the college world, like what was different, what was weird. I didn't know any of that. But he called me and I said, "So what do you want me to do?" He said, "Well, I want you to be the director of strength and conditioning. Okay. And I want you to coach running backs too." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I still get to, because I said, "Listen, that's the only way I'll come. I still want to coach football. I don't want to just be in the weight room. I still want to coach football." So he said, "Okay, I'll let you coach running backs as well," and all that. So we took a leap of faith, and we had, like I said, we had one child ready. And I think I took about a $20,000 pay cut, which doesn't sound like a whole lot to many people, but when you're only making 60 and now you're making 40 with a child and you're moving, and there's no moving expenses and there's none of this fancy stuff that I hear coaches get. But when he took a chance on me, and I've always had respect for guys that would take a chance on me. He didn't know me from anybody. He watched a 20-minute segment of me coaching a weight room of high school kids. And so it just sort of worked out. And me and my wife looked and said, "Yeah, we're going to take this and we'll give it 3 years." We looked up a decade later and we're still there. And part of it was that because my wife played softball at UT Martin. She played center field there. So it was, to a certain extent, it was home for us. But it was also an opportunity to coach with who I think is a great head football coach and a great offensive mind. And part of the reason that I look at things defensively is how he looked at things offensively and how to defend him. Because for the first 7 years, I was an assistant head coach, I was a running backs coach, I was a strength and conditioning coordinator, I was a special teams coordinator. Then I went to linebackers, and then finally got out of the weight room. And for my last 3 seasons, obviously, I was the defensive coordinator. But I always looked for ways to stop him, and because he's so good at what he does. And so, there were other opportunities, obviously, that I could have took a plunge for, but I was never going to leave him for what I thought was the same job. I didn't care how much it paid. That didn't matter to me. It was more about perception through his eyes. And up until Marshall offered me the special teams coordinator, Doc Holliday, who's another great coach, I didn't really think about another job. I just stayed doing what I was doing at him because he took a chance on me. I was going to make sure I did the best possible job for him. And that's, it was fun. Honestly, I love that place.
Martin's a special community. I've spent a little too much time at Cadillacs in a past life. But anyway, so you mentioned you believe Martin, you moved to Marshall for a year. What drew you to Memphis? What was when you saw that opportunity or were presented with that, what was like okay, this is one move I've got to make?
Well, I mean, family is huge to me. And that's part of the reason I stayed at Martin. I wanted to, as long as I had a room of players that I could coach, I'm good. I don't have to move to California to do that. And taking the leap of faith to go 3 hours to Martin, Tennessee, that didn't take us far away from our family. My family still lives in Hornwell, Tennessee. But with the Memphis, being back in the state of Tennessee, which to me, I've only recruited the state of Tennessee in 15 years. And the majority of the guys that, like, especially in the mid-state area, I worked with a lot of those guys. Kevin Creasy at Oakland High School, Will Kreisky, Matt Kreisky at Blackman. I worked with all those guys. So like the relationships are very important in the recruiting stage of it. And this is where I was from. So staying in the state and getting the opportunity when Coach McIntyre and Coach Silverfield gave me that opportunity, it was a no-brainer. There was no chance I was doing anything else. And there's a side note of this. My sister lives in Memphis, and she's got 6 children. And she actually works at Bellevue Church out on 40. And my mom, she almost disowned me when I moved to Marshall, when I moved to West Virginia, because there was, especially during COVID, she didn't see her 3 grandchildren from me for an entire year. So when I called her and told her, I say, there might be an opportunity at Memphis. She said, I don't care who calls you, that's where you're going. That's 2 hours from me. I'll have 9 grandchildren within 2 hours of me. She said, and you have to stay forever. I said, well, I don't know if you know how college football works, Mom. I don't control how all this works, but that's the drive for me. I love it here. I love it in Memphis. My family loves it in Memphis. My wife is an elementary teacher out in Collierville, and she's in that community. My kids are all in this community, especially out in the Collierville area, but just the whole Memphis and in-state family, everything fits for us to be here. Everything.
So one last kind of football question and then a couple other questions, but what were your emotions when Coach Silverfield said, you know what, I want you to be our defensive coordinator moving forward? Talk us through that a little bit.
Excited. I mean, it is a big deal. It is a big deal, obviously, and I know it is, but to me, decisions create opportunities. I don't really think about, okay, well, this has happened, so you need to be more excited this time. I was just as excited to be the head strength coach and running backs coach at UT Martin in 2010. I was just as excited to be the offensive line coach at Riverdale High School. Now, obviously, I understand how big the situation is. I get that, but once I start letting situations and opportunities get bigger than what your job description is, and that the job description is to play great defense. There's a lot that goes into that, so obviously the excitement level is huge, and everything that comes with the prestige of the University of Memphis and being the defense coordinator. Yes, it is a huge deal, and I am extremely excited. But I try my best in every situation to keep a level head and do the best job I can possibly do and leave it better than I found it.
All right, just 3 more one's kind of a football for me, and I think Brian has another one. The most important question, and Coach Silverfield really disappointed us at press conference for the Liberty Bowl when he answered this incorrectly. Wet ribs or dry ribs?
Dry ribs.
Hey, man, I like to hear that. This guy's going places, fellas. Secondly, on the booth or on the field? In the booth or on the field as a DC?
Wait a second. So let's go back to this dry rib thing. Okay. So have you ever gotten, and I hope McCormick gives me some money on this, but the McCormick Memphis pit rub, dry rub that they sell in the packets?
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, okay, I'm just making sure.
Have you ever had muddy ribs? This is really important.
No.
Half wet, half dry. Central.
Half wet, half dry.
Oh, Central. Okay.
Yeah, Central. Yeah, they're really good. So on the field or in the booth, which do you prefer as a DC?
Well, I prefer what I did Iowa State. I prefer being on the field. There are things that change that, because there's like from what I've found out, I've done both, but you can obviously see how I am on the sideline, and there's glass up in the press box.
Yeah, you're so quiet and reserved and still,
and it's hard for me, there's a lot of different factors that go into that, and you're going to have to go through the whole process of figuring out, like, what are your coaches best at, what do your players need, because what we needed in Iowa State, there were multiple times, I don't know if you noticed this, but there were multiple times I huddled up the entire defense through that game. And they needed to see my eyes, and I needed to see theirs. And so, like, it just depends situation by situation. But what was needed in that game is me on the field. And I can't answer 100% what it will be right now in the fall.
Last question. Other than the Bible, what's the last book you read?
Can't remember the name of it. I read the books in the summers, so that's when I mainly get them, because during season I do devotions the best I can in the mornings, but in the summer was I can see the front of it. I can't remember 100%. I can't.
Fiction or nonfiction?
It's fiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
At least we got that.
Yeah.
I want to take you back. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm going to take you back to your playing days. I'm going to try to jog your memory a little bit again, since I got you on the high school. Your senior year, I looked up your stats. You had 1 sack. Do you remember against who it was and who you sacked?
I had 1 sack. Did I really?
That's what it said online.
Yeah.
I was. That and it showed just one, because I was looking and I was like, since it was only 1, I'm like, okay, that'd be an easy one for me to pick on, to see if you remember that specific one.
Oh, if I had to guess, I would say Harpeth High School was who it was against, but honestly,
No, in college.
Oh, in college.
Yes.
Eastern Illinois. Was it Eastern Illinois?
According to UT Martin's website, it was against Tennessee State. And it was a sack for a loss of 10 yards. The quarterback was Riley Walker. So I looked up Riley Walker, and it says he's now the assistant principal at Hillsborough. So if you ever go recruiting at Hillsborough.
That's great. I'm going to go find him. To be honest with you, I said Eastern Illinois, hoping that it would have been Tony Romo. That's what I was hoping. I couldn't remember if I sacked him or not.
Hey, so was that the most famous player you played against, Tony Romo?
Yeah, that sits out in my head.
I had Kelly Holcomb.
Yeah.
Middle Tennessee.
So Kelly was at Riverdale a few years back. So I still talk to Kelly quite a bit. But the funny thing, and I'm sure this didn't happen to you, but when we were playing Eastern Illinois, we weren't even told who Tony Romo was. Their best player was a running back. I can't remember his name, but I remember walking out on that field, and all they talked about, guys, we got to stop the back. We got to stop the back. And I think Tony threw for maybe 400 yards that day. I remember walking off the field. I was like, nobody's going to give us a heads up on this guy?
Yeah, that guy might be something someday with a little bit of practice. Well, hey, Coach, congratulations on the recent promotion to defensive coordinator and all your success. And thank you so much for spending some time with us this evening and telling a little bit of your story.
Yes, thank y'all so much for the
best of luck
for Tigers. Go Tigers. I appreciate it.
Thanks.